relationships is such a huge part of your life. And it's not just your intimate partner, it's with your mom and your dad and your
Yeah.
siblings, it's with your
Friends and
kids, it's with your friends, it's with your clients, it's with your co-workers, it's with
yeah,
people you collaborate. And it's like, it's not just one relationship, is it's not how you are in one relationship, but it's how you are in the whole of relationship, because how you show up and relate in these spaces comes back to your self-worth, comes back to your alignment, your energetics. It comes back to who you are as a soul, as a leader, as a trailblazer. And it's like when these relationships don't work, or they're not it's not like they have to always be filling you up, but it's like having the reciprocity in these relationships. So if there's not balance and harmony and the give and the receive, and then that's where you're going to be out of alignment. So I think relationships it's a huge topic, but it's like bringing it back to how these relationships actually affect your business and affect your ability to create wealth and create abundance. Because if you're distracted and you can't focus on your business and make clear decisions because you've got drama or shit going on in your relation, like it's like, who's ever had a job, or I remember when I was younger and I was in a job and I would have a relationship, and then something would happen in that relationship and it would just be all consuming and I couldn't show up for my work. So how do we actually navigate that? How do we navigate relationships to improve our wealth or improve our abundance, or improve, like make it all work so that we have got the best of both worlds? And not that, like, how many millionaires or billionaires you'll see that have one or the other. They have a very successful business and shithouse relationships, or people who have amazing relationships but struggle in business. Let's look at the definition of what a toxic relationship is. Is it really toxic, or is it just a relationship that's not serving you? Because this is what I see, like so many people, the minute a relationship's not serving them, they then start throwing out all these labels of toxic relationships and narcissists and this and that. And it's like a projection of like, I'm the victim and you are a perpetrator, and our like experience together, or our relationship together was traumatic. I just see that so much and I'm like, can we just scale it back a bit for a minute? Like, why can't we have conscious separations? Or why can't we, especially like if you look in business, when you're employing people, when you've got workers, volunteers, subcontractors, and you go into agreement with these people to work in your business, in your legacy, you want to maintain a level of professionalism, and you want to maintain a level of like just being human, allow the tough conversations. But how are we going to, exit some of these relationships? Because it's it's not the ending that depicts whether or not you're a good human, it's how the ending occurred. You know what? We're human. Humans fuck up. People make mistakes in work. People make mistakes in relationships. Sometimes communication breaks down. And this is where you kind of go, how much are you allowing for humanness, and how much are you actually just being a doormat, or allowing behavior that just isn't in a true alignment for you? So it's nuanced. Every situation is going to be different, but usually I find that the behaviors will start kind of appearing. And I know, especially in my business, when these intuitions keep coming and it's like, you got to let this person go. You got to let this person go. They're not a fit. They're not a fit. It's not working. And I'll like feel bad for them, and I'll really want it to work. And I'll want it to work so much that I'll go, okay, how can I do different to help it work? But relationship is two-sided. So as much as I want it to work, if the other person's not coming to the party and it's just not a fit, it's not bad, it's just not a fit. So it's like, okay, we've got to have the conversation. You've got to be able to talk about it. And I've had co-workers that I can have these tough conversations with, and no one takes it personally. Because when you have an issue, whether it's in business or personal relationship, the only way that you can resolve the issue is by communicating through it. And I always say, like, it's like the song, we're going on a bear hunt, can't go over it, can't go. You've got to go through it, right? And you've got to go through it honestly. And I think it takes a very certain type of person to be able to show up for these conversations honestly, to be able to share vulnerably, not take things personally, and not reject the other side. And that's a level of leadership that if you really do want to expand and grow and evolve and build more, like this is what business is calling for. People to show up in these skills so that you're not just pretty on the social media because everything looks fine and dandy, but what's happening in real life, in the behind the curtain in your business and behind closed doors in your personal relationships is, the best possible version of yourself that you could be.
So when you're working a business or you're growing a business or even in a job or whatever the situation is, when you're in these relationships that don't work, do you feel that it affects your business as well, as opposed to when you're in good relationships, it feels good?
Yes. Okay. Because when you're in a relationship that is not working, right? So you're getting these little hits that, maybe there's some behaviors that aren't aligned to who you are or what you want or the highest version for your life. You're getting these hits, you might be ignoring them, right? And what will happen is that will actually stifle your energy, right? It'll put limitations in you, right? Because one thing is it will divert your energy because things aren't working. That's going to take capacity, right? Because you're going to be thinking about it. You're going to be processing it. You might be holding some resentment, some anger, some disappointment, some frustration, right? For me, frustration was always, if I'm feeling frustrated, that's my soul telling me something's out of alignment. But I'm not just going to be frustrated and go, oh, burn it all to the ground, it's out of alignment. I've got to go, okay, well, what is this frustration? Right? And because your energy is then sitting in frustration, that's a lower frequency, right? And it doesn't mean that you are low vibrational. It's just you can't reach the highest possible frequency if you're sitting in frustration, because that's a lower vibration, right? So what that will do is, there'll be cords or attachments, there'll be thought forms that you'll be projecting out in this frustration, and that takes up some of your capacity. So because that's taking your capacity, then when you need to focus on business decisions or wealth creation, or you need inspiration, so you need to be tapped into your channel, right? Your true essence and your true energy, because these other things are going on and you've got energy going out and thought forms, going out. Then when you try and do that, it's not at your full capacity, right? It's kind of like your energy is diluted. So it's not that these things are bad or wrong and you have to cut the cords or, affirm your way to success, but we actually have to go to the core of what's happening in these dynamics. Otherwise, if you just, this is why I believe that it's holistic. You can do all the cord cutting ceremonies and affirmation, rituals that you want, but if you don't go to the core issue to come back to wholeness for yourself, you're just going to repeat the same cycles and the same patterns. Now, now, obviously, I have my own experiences in this, and I can see where I was like very much in that space. And it doesn't mean I'm not going to be in that space in the future, but I have the awareness so that when these things are happening and when I feel like my business is suffering as a result, or I'm not a full clear channel for what I choose, and I can go, oh, well, what's happening in my environment, what's happening in the relationships around me, and where do I need to focus my energy and attention? Where do I need to have some tough conversations, or where do I need to resolve some internal conflicts? Right? Because it's always on the inner. And as much as we want to project our problems out to other people, the problem's there because it's in you. You've got to resolve that.
So, what would be your best advice for someone who's feeling like the pulls and the nudges, but they're in a really low vibration? These relationships have drained them. What would be your best advice for someone to get their energy back, to make the steps needed to cut the cords where they need to?
So if you're in a relationship, or you're in a dynamic in your business where you might know you need to let someone go, or you need to, change things up a bit, like these things shouldn't be taken lightly. I don't, like, I'm not a like just pull all the weeds out and start again, because relationships, they're so intertwined. But we have to recognize first, if you're feeling like you're in a relationship that needs to end, or if you're in a relationship that's not serving your highest good, or there's a worker that you have that you need to let go because you know that they're just not a fit, you don't have to go and rip the band-aid off, right? It's not about what you're doing, it's how you do it. And I think before you take any kinds of actions, you need to go within, right? Because you've got to fill your cup up. You've got to make sure that these decisions are coming from your soul. They're coming from your heart. And they're not actually coming from a place where you're triggered and the relationship is actually serving you, but that in serving you, it's showing up in what seems like a negative way, but it's actually positive, and they're contributing to your growth. Right. So do you see what I'm trying to say? Like, a lot of people misinterpret negative experiences in their relationships as, this doesn't serve me, I've got to get rid of it. But actually, maybe it does serve you. And this relationship is calling you forward into being a better version. So we've got to look at your energy and your ability to show up in this space. And if you're at a place where you just don't feel like you can show up in this relationship, then say that. Just say, I feel so defeated. I feel so depleted. I just don't feel like I have the capacity to show up the way that I want to show up right now. I need to take some space to process and find out what's going on. Now, obviously, if it's a professional relationship, you don't need to necessarily say that, but you do need to take that space. And you need to give yourself the opportunity to just assess what's going on. Now, in work, this is where it could be, hey, I'm just feeling like some things aren't working out, and I'd really love to talk about it. What do you want out of this role, and how can I show up for you to provide that? And then, you open the discussions of, well, what do I want from this role as well? Do you know what I mean? But before you do that, you've got to work those things out. So you got to take space, right? Find out where you're at. This is a process, right? We just don't go in, like, I've just seen in the past where most often than not, I will just let things go, let things go, let things go, let things go, let them go so long until, the damage of that is so, I wouldn't say big, but it's in unavoidable, right? So then instead of dealing with it from the beginning, it's grown into a bigger issue. So then there's been a bit more mess to clean up as a result. Whereas if I had just address it at the beginning of, hey, I'm sort of feeling this. What are you, you know, and then we move through that. Again, it's a relationship, so there's always two sides. Right? So take the space, give back to yourself, work out how you even truly feel, but you've got to come out of your projections and your triggers. Because when we're in a triggered state, we can't truly know how we feel. You're in a triggered state. And for some people, they process things differently. So you might process in solitude. You might need space, go to the beach, go for a walk in the forest, right? Or you might be a person that has to process through talking. So call your bestie, but don't make it a shit can session. Like, process through discussion how you process. Everyone is different. So there's not going to be a one way. But for me personally, it's I need to move my body. I need to move my body. I need to get outside. I need to be in the sun. I need to go for a walk on the beach, or I go for a hike in the forest, or I just need to like chill. And sometimes it's like, yeah, we got to turn the noise off so we can come back to ourselves and start giving us the energy that we need so we can work this stuff out. Sometimes it's me. I'll just sit out the back, right? I've got a beautiful view, beautiful home. I'll sit out the back and I'll just like gaze off into the distance, like literally the pretty much, November, December, I spent a lot of time just sitting outside, just looking at the sky, looking at the clouds, and not letting any external noise affect.
It's very much the feather the brick in the truck situation. Like if you don't deal with it when you get the niggles, like the truck's going to come along and it's going to be, we've tried to tell you this is what you need to do.
Right.
So when I know I'm really bad for when I start to get the niggles, like the feather,
Mm-hmm.
be like, is this actually what I need to do? Or am I, and I start second guessing myself. Like, what do you do? Or what would be your advice to someone who, instead of listening to it, is second guessing themselves?
Mm-hmm. 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 So when you start to get these little intuitions or these little niggles that things aren't necessarily working the way that you hoped, you've got to take action because the universe will always respond. And if you don't want to perpetuate the same relationship cycles in your business or in personal relationships, then you're going to have to do something differently. And this is where I like to have a bit of a pattern interrupt, right? So if I've got an experience where one of my co-workers is, I've just sort of made a request, right? And I've said, hey, would you mind if we can do this? Right? That's me making a change. It's making a request, right? But then if the same issue arises again, I don't just go, oh, fuck, it's all over now, like it's happened again, right? We've got to allow for the humanness. So change takes time. When you're learning to drive a car, do you drive a car one time and then you fully know how to drive a car completely unconsciously? No, right? It takes time. So I do believe allowing for that time to grow and change. So it's like, hey, this is kind of happening. This is how I feel. How do you feel? Let's talk about it. Let's pattern interrupt this behavior and give it a chance to grow, right? Give it a chance to change. And then, if changes over an extended period of time after multiple conscious conversations, and I say conscious because, people, they'll have conversations, but they're not really addressing the elephant in the room. And that requires vulnerability. So when we have these conscious conversations, you got to say what you really feel, what you really think. So after time, if these changes still don't happen, that's when you, excuse me, that's when you can then look at, well, is this working relationship serving us? Is this what I want for the business? Is this what I want? Is this the kind of culture that I want to create? Because at the end of the day, these relationships that you're creating is creating a culture. And I like to look at my business and the work that I do in the world. And literally, I've already had three people email me in 13 days. What is it, the 13th of January? I've had three people email me and they're like, Abby, have you got any roles? Because the culture that I create within my organization, I want it to be wholesome and it's together and it's collaborative and we can have these tough conversations. I'm going to hold you accountable and I'm okay for you to hold me accountable as well.
Another thing that I think a lot of people can misinterpret is that things going not well in your life or your business isn't always a reflection of your relationships as well. So I feel like you can have a really great relationship with people going on and have shit going on in your business. And at the same time, you can have an incredible business and have a shit relationship going on. Like, how do you maintain the balance between understanding what's linked and what's not?
Yeah. So sometimes when things are going on in our business and they're not that great, but we have, a great relationship, just because those things that aren't great are happening in your business doesn't mean that the whole is out of whack. This is where I think when you know who you are and what your goals are, your aspirations, what your visions, what you're wanting to achieve, what you're you know you know what your values are. If something's not working in an area, it doesn't mean that the whole is fucked. I think that it's going to be a case by case scenario for everyone. And this is why with my Oracle deck, I've got relationship abundance, because relationship is its whole area in and of itself. But if your bank balance is suffering, it doesn't mean your relationships are suffering too. But I'm just saying that, how we show up in creation, how we show up in leadership, how we show up in our businesses, relationships are an important element of that. And you have to look at how you're relating with people. And if you're not working towards having conscious, valuable, soul nourishing relationships in all areas, then why are you in business? I think this is the future that we're moving towards. When I say moving out of 3D business and into 5D business, how you show up in relationships is important. It's no longer someone being a boss and like dictating to everyone. Like I've seen that and I'm just like, people want to feel nourished, even if they are an entry level, low level worker of, VA over in the Philippines, whatever, they still want to feel they're humans. And I think the businesses that do step into more conscious, wholesome relationships and ways of communicating with people, it's going to improve the value of your business because of that culture you're creating. Right. So yeah, just because you're having struggles in your business doesn't mean it's because of relationships, but there's got to be a point where we hold the mirror up and look at, well, how are we showing up in relationship?
Which also comes back down to self-worth.
Absolutely.
How massive is self-worth in your relationships?
Yeah, because when you show up in relationship, that is then a reflection of the level of self-worth that you have. So I always say, self-worth is like a bank account, right? And we are born with an abundance of self-worth. It's infinite, right? And what happens is through our childhood and our upbringing and the environments that we've been brought up in, you can either have deposits or withdrawals from that self-worth. So it's self-worth, high self-esteem, and confidence, right? And this is a huge value at the soul level, because when those withdrawals are taken out of that self-worth bank account, it can then go into a negative. And that's when people are in, states of trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression, all sorts of things. They have very low self-esteem, low self-worth, low confidence. So it's on them to then start putting deposits back in. Right. And at the beginning, it doesn't feel very good because you put a deposit into, and when I say a deposit, a self-worth deposit, This is relating, right? This is in relationship because it's how you're relating to yourself, how much you love yourself, how much you accept yourself. Do you know your core values? Do you know what you want? Who you are as a person matters. So when you can know yourself fully, that's self-worth, right? And then when you know who you are and then you start relating with others, you're going to show up as a representation of that. So if you don't know who you are and you don't value yourself and you're not very confident, you're going to project that outwards, and that's how you're going to show up in those relationships. So I often look at, if you social media, right? So social media is all about social relationships and connection, right? And it's a high level view of people's life. So of course we get the highlight reel, right? But you're not relating at a deep level with someone. So how can you know or judge like, I just feel like there's such a huge weight put on social media that if I am following someone on social media and I see their life, I know them, right? And then as a form of that, they then create their judgments and projections. And it's, well, those judgments and projections that you're putting out on social media have nothing to do with who you're judging or projecting on, and everything to do with the reflection of yourself. 100%, because it's such a highlight reel, it's not real. Any judgment you put out on someone else, oh, they posted this and they said that. Yeah, but that is a projection of you and what's going on for you on some level. So people will show up in these relationships as yourself, right? As who you are. And that could be someone with very low confidence. So when I recognized this to begin with, and I wanted to improve my self-worth and my confidence, I created a little task for myself. I was like, okay, so how am I going to create this? I want to build more confidence, right? And I recognized that I was having a lot of projections, and I was like, well, how am I? And it was compliments, right? So usually you can tell your level of self-worth through your ability to receive compliments, right? If someone compliments you and you reject it, there's a good chance that you might have a lower level of self-worth than someone who receives a compliment and accepts it. So I wanted to increase my self-worth, and I recognized I was always rejecting compliments. I could never take a compliment, or if I received a compliment, I felt like I had to compliment someone back. Like I couldn't just receive. So I went through this process where for 28 days, I made it a point for myself to give one comment a day, to give one compliment a day. But it wasn't just any compliment. I wanted to really think out this compliment and make it truly come from my heart and mean something. So whenever I complimented someone, it wasn't like, oh, I love your hair, or oh, your dress is so pretty today. It was like complimenting someone on their personality, on who they are, right? And so for 28 days, I did one compliment a day. And what happened was, it was like I retrained my subconscious mind that because I was giving compliments to people and it was coming from my heart and I really meant it, that anytime someone then gave me a compliment, I started to see it through the lens of my experience of giving compliments. So when someone would give me a compliment, whether it was real or not, I was like, wow, thank you. Because I had trained a new behavior and an energetic exchange. So I could actually take that and receive it with like grace and just be like, it doesn't matter how they're giving the compliment. I know how I give compliments. So if someone wants to give me a compliment, thank you so much. It means the world to me that you would say that. So you can see that like these relationship dynamics, it's how you're showing up. So how are you showing up in giving compliments? Are you being half-assed and fake, or do you really genuinely care? Like, do you genuinely care that the person who's on the receiving end of this compliment receives it? And is that the baseline for then how you want to show up for people?
And also, when that self worth expands, your energy around you changes, people start to notice. And when things go to shit, whether it is relationships, whether it is business, just life in general, like shit happens, you deal with it differently.
Oh, yeah, right? Because, you know, yes, right? So shit is always going to happen. Relationships are so nuanced. It's the 360 perspective. Every potentiality exists. Something happens one day in your relationship, and the next week it might be completely different. Right? So it's not about having like a process of how you show up in every interaction and relationships, but it's actually just coming back to the wholeness of who you are and who you want to be in the world, and then showing up from that place. Because shit happens. People can be assholes. I can be an asshole, but I've integrated the shadow aspect of myself and I've accepted the parts of me that is an asshole. So if in someone else's reality, I'm showing up as an asshole and they can meet me in that and express from a place of wanting to move through it consciously and lovingly, then hands down, I'm here for that. I'm so here for that. And sorry, can you repeat the question? There's something else.
When you up your self worth and you feel good about yourself in business, relationships, life in general, when things go to shit, you deal with it so much better. You feel better.
Right. Because I'm here for that, because I have enough self-worth and confidence within myself to know that this does not define me, right? Who I am. And that's what happens, right? Because when you are increasing your level of self-worth and you're increasing your confidence and you can show up in these places, you're coming to a realization that you've had behaviors in the past that didn't recognize the fullness of yourself. So you couldn't show up in these places in that. And when you then accept those parts of yourself, you embrace those parts, you love those parts of yourself, and you're true to the truest part of who you are, and then you show up from that place, everything changes, because you then start to handle the relationships different. You start to handle conversations differently. You start to, this is the evolution and the growth. So the people who are attached to a past identity of who you are when you've been through all of this growth, that version of you doesn't exist. And if you're stepping into wholeness and completeness and showing up true, true wholeness, then you're only going to step into more success. You're going to step into more ways of thriving in your business, thriving in your relationships, thriving in the areas of life that maybe at one time in your life you struggled. And this is what I think true abundance is. This is what I think moving into the 5D is. It's wholeness, completeness, being okay with the mess. Because in your wholeness, you can handle it. And everyone is just doing the best that they can.
When things do start to shift and bad things start to happen, and you feel yourself slipping back to maybe getting that lower self worth or getting in your head, what are your favorite ways to stay you know,
Come back to wholeness.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, do you know what? This happened for me yesterday. Do you know? And it's not about oh doing a process and then it's never going to happen for you again. It's a constant involvement, right? And I think it's the recognition of holy shit, I'm in my head, right? Because we'll make things up to suit our narrative without addressing it. So it's not just a, oh, I'm going to do some self-worth exercises and then all of a sudden I have all this amazing self-worth. Self-worth is constant every day. Right. So am I showing up in wholeness or am I in my head? Am I overthinking? Am I creating scenarios that don't actually exist? You are your creator. And what realities are you creating? Sometimes we actually need to pause the movie. Go, what the fuck's going on? Right. So what I like to do, pattern interrupt. That's the best possible thing. You have to be aware that you're perpetuating this reality and you want to change it. If you truly, truly want to change it, you're going, okay, I'm in my head, I'm having this scenario happen, and I need a pattern interrupt. So, what can you do? A pattern interrupt is not a thought, it's an action. You need to do something differently. So, what are you going to create for yourself that is a different action to what you've done before? So that anytime this event arises or this scenario arises, and these scenarios, they'll come in all sorts of different forms because the universe wants to test you, because the universe wants you to move beyond it. It's not a test, it's an evolution. Move beyond, right? So create that pattern interrupt that pulls you out of that reality. Press pause on the movie and go, what the fuck's going on here? So for everyone, that's different. A pattern interrupt might be leaving well, I wouldn't say leaving the scenario because sometimes that can be an avoidance pattern, but everyone's going to be different. Right. And you don't want to go into an avoidance pattern. You don't want to go into a fight kind of pattern, but you just need something small to signal to your subconscious mind and to your soul that you want to do something differently.
And what is your favorite pattern interrupt? Like, I know a lot of people say, like, sometimes you get just switch your mind immediately, wear that rubber band on your wrist. So every time you have that thought, you flick your wrist. What is your favorite way of just becoming aware and then being like, okay, I need to shift? How do you physically embody that?
Goodness. Yeah, because I used to struggle being in my head so much. For me, it's water. Right. So for me, it's like I'll have a shower. I'm like, yep, I need to do something different, have a shower, have a bath, or I'll jump in the pool, right? I'll just like, I need to cleanse or I just need to wash away what's actually happening. So it's like if I'm in a scenario, and I know it's not as like easy as flicking a band, but to me that just has the biggest impact, right? If I flicked a rubber band on my wrist, well, I don't think I've even ever tried that, you know? Yeah, just water. Water has been huge for me. Sometimes it'll be I'll spray myself with body mist. It's like I want to pattern interrupt spray and have a little dance or something. I've got to move my body. Water and movement are the biggest things for me. So spray myself with a mist. Um, I've got to shift the energy, right? You've got to change your state. So it's finding something that works, that actually pulls you out of that loop that you're in.